This video, we are making a dress with no pattern. I'm gonna start with a big bag of scrap fabric. I'm using these scraps to design my pattern, and you'll see how.
Start with cutting off a random piece of scrap fabric and cutting off a straight edge. Take that straight edge,
And I'm basically lining up with the center of my mannequin.
then I'm cutting off all the excess fabric that I just know I'm not gonna use in my pattern.
So I'm basically going to add a little bit of a dart here. I wanna split it between the side and the front, and I'm gonna fold it over. You want to smooth it all out.
As I fold, I'm pinning it in place.
Do this side. You can literally position it wherever you want.
Then I'm finishing it off with a pin.
Now I'm gonna draw where I want my neckline to be. I'm being very generous with my space here because I want to make sure that I don't cut too far and then I can't fix any of my mistakes. And then kind of just play with the shape a little bit. And I'm gonna cut where that line is. I'm just cutting it at the natural waist on my mannequin to give myself a visual of what this is supposed to look like. And then cut right at this side seam here. I realized that I cut too much out of this armhole here, and the great thing about a mock-up is you can always just patch it up. So I'm gonna stick this right in here and then retrim how I want it. Now I'm going to take another piece just like we did, and I straight edged that one side. I'm going to put it with the center back, and then I'm going to cut just like I did before, just kind of generally cut out all this excess stuff so I can focus on where I'm at here. Cut up this waist.
As you can see, I'm cutting and I'm not adding any seam allowances. I'm gonna add those later.
I'm only doing one side because we're just gonna mirror it. There's no need to recut out on the other side. It actually looks perfectly exact if you just mirror it from this side to that side. Next, I'm gonna mark where all my darts are. I add pins right where the line is, and then fold this over and draw this here.
As I'm tracing the darts, I'm readjusting the pins so that I can have an accurate drawing of my darts.
Grab some packing paper.
So I laid out my packing paper so I could lay out my pieces and trace the actual pattern pieces onto the packing paper, which is a perfect, cheap way of tracing your patterns. And as you can see, I have them all traced out and I made it into a mock-up and it looks great.
I tried it on, it seems to work pretty well. I'm gonna try a new technique and you'll just see as I start working. I'm going to mark 1.25 inches going all the way around.
After I had traced all the way around the neckline, I ended up cutting it out at the neckline and taking it to my packing paper and tracing it as a pattern piece. And I took apart the rest of my mock-up and traced those pieces as well so I could remake a new mock-up.
Let out the dart a little bit. You can see how much I did because I didn't want it super fitted. I want it to be a little bit more relaxed.
I have all my new pattern pieces traced and now I'm ready to make another mock-up so that I can make sure that the final fit looks really good. I added my seam allowances and then I sewed on the neckband and it seemed to work out great once I had trimmed it down to 1/4 inch. Then I pressed it open, seemed to be looking pretty good. I added it to the mannequin and here's the result. I cut the seam allowance off here so I could see what it looked like.
I really like the fit. However, I did have to take a little bit in right here so that it wouldn't gape in the front here because as you can see, it is gaping out. Now here it's not as bad. I'm ready to actually make the dress.
I decided to use an Indian block print, so I laid out all of my pattern pieces and cut them out. Then I decided to use a white cotton voile to use as my lining, just so it could have a light, airy feel. Then I proceeded to sew the bodice together and the bodice of the lining.
I'm adding an extra layer of the cotton voile to the neckline piece to act as an interfacing piece.
After I just pressed them together, I stitched them together and treated it as one piece. Then I proceeded to finish the lining and sew the lining to the bodice and do my special stitch on the outside and press it so the neckline is perfectly straight.
I'm happy with it. I tried it on. It doesn't look good on the mannequin, but it looks great on me. I forgot to sew the straps, so we're gonna go do that.
So I measured from the front neckline all the way to the back of the dress and I cut out my strips according to the length that I wanted, sewed them together on both sides of the straps, and I flipped it inside out and pressed it flat on the iron so I could actually open up the bodice and insert them in between the layers.
You're probably wondering what in the world is wrong with this bodice and why is it so short it looks like an empire waist. Well, because I have a short torso, I actually have to have it a lot shorter here. So basically I measure from the top of my shoulder to the last rib down here at the bottom, And that is where my waist is supposed to land. I am a 15 from here to my waist. Now from here to this natural waist on the mannequin, it's actually 17 inches, which is a big difference. This is the key to why a lot of dresses look frumpy on women, because it's at the wrong waistline. I will tell you, if I bought my wedding dress from a bridal shop, I would have looked like a big frump, because all of the bodice, no joking, all of the bodices in the bridal shop are way too long on me.
Now I'm measuring the skirt length down to lower calf, and I'm going from my natural waist right under that last rib down, and I'm translating that measurement onto the fabric, and I'm basically just using a measuring tape and moving it over. Then I put the outside seam on a diagonal and drew my lines for the waistline. Then I cut out my skirt piece, and I cut out 3 of those on the fold, but then I cut 1 and cut the fold off. So I had 4 cut, but 1 not on the fold. So I stitched all the seams together in the skirt, hemmed it twice 1 inch, and stitched it down. Now I was ready to attach it to the bodice. I gathered all my gathering stitches, and then I stitched it to the bodice, but I realized I had way too many gathers. So I decided to let it out a little bit. So I let it out about 8 inches at each seam, which is a lot of inches. Then I sewed it back on and pressed the gathers down so it wouldn't look so fluffy. Then I decided to add an invisible zipper. And then I tucked the lining in underneath, hand stitched that down, and it's done. I was really happy with how it turned out, and honestly it was exactly what I was envisioning, and it wasn't too poofy in the waist, which I'm always afraid of, and the fullness was perfect.
Here's the deal, you guys. Please comment below on any tips or tricks that you have learned in creating your own patterns. I would absolutely love to hear from you.
And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, remember?